Week 1 of the NFL season is finally here, which means we have a legitimate game to talk about for the New Orleans Saints. What are the key matchups against the Panthers? What is the outlook for Derek Carr this season? And a whole lot more right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu. And as always, this program is brought to you by Scott Fickner. Injury lawyers have been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Fickner handles it all. Give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. Like I mentioned at the top of this show, Week 1 is here, and the Saints are going to kick off their season with a divisional matchup against the Carolina Panthers. And look, you always want to say it's must win, but when you start looking at this schedule, it feels really desperate for a team that's entering their season opener. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Before I get into the early schedule, the Saints-Panthers Week 1 matchup, I want to focus on Derek Carr because there's been an interesting conversation about number 4 and his second season with the Saints. So let's kind of dive into it. Earlier this week, Matthew Paris put a lengthy article out for NOLA.com about Derek Carr entering his second season with the Saints and whether or not he could win the fans over. And I think a majority of the responses were, no, he can't win the Who Dat Nation over. They feel like the damage has been done. There's nothing he can do this year to change their minds. And for some people, that may be true. There is a legitimate possibility that Derek Carr will never win over the Who Dat Nation. There's a possibility that even if the Saints are good this year, and not a lot of people are expecting it, but let's say the Saints overachieve, there might be some people that say, I really can't care about Derek Carr. I don't want to watch him. I can't stand him. They'll feel that way. Me personally, here's where I'm at with Derek Carr. I don't think he's a special quarterback. I don't think he's a game-changing quarterback for this team, a franchise-altering guy, but I'll just simply put, if the Saints win ball games, he's playing a big factor in them winning ball games, and there is that leadership that you see on display, then I'm all for it, and I'm all for that. And for me as a fan, what I want is for the Saints to succeed. And as we enter this season, I could say right now, if things start going, sideways and it looks like they're out-coached and outmatched and they're undisciplined, you guys know how I roll. I will mention it. I will get very animated about it. I will ask for people to get fired. I will probably start looking like a child complaining every single Sunday. And it's going to get tiring for some people. But right now, we're entering Week 1. I choose to be optimistic at this moment in time. And I want to see the Saints succeed. And if that means Derek Carr goes out there and plays a decent role in the Saints winning games and thrives in Clint Kubiak's system, let's do this. Honestly, I mentioned how excited I am for Spencer Rattler. I tried to have some hope for Jay Kaner. But at the end of the day, we're in the year 2024. We don't know how long we got on this earth. I want to see the Saints win ball games right now. So hopefully Derek Carr is able to play a role in that. And it's not going to change everyone's opinion. There are going to be some people who are out on Derek Carr because maybe he rubbed them the wrong way with the way he handled himself on the field, the way he handled press conferences, and all that is fair. I don't think that Derek Carr has gotten, criticism for no reason. I think there is reason for it. And then people choose whether or not they want to over-exaggerate it or leave it as is. I just want to see the Saints win. And if Derek does a good job this year, that's all I really care about, because at the end of the day, I'm not spending my hours with Derek Carr. I'm spending 3 hours a week watching this team, hoping that they can put a smile on my face, put a smile on your face, and that's what should matter. So can Derek Carr win fans over? The key word is in that question right there. Win. You do that, Saints fans will forgive. They will kind of, in a way, put their arm around you. And I know he doesn't have the charisma of quarterbacks that have come before him, but Saints were winning with Teddy Bridgewater. We loved it. Saints were 5-2 with Jameis Winston at one point. We loved it. Now, Carr is better. He's a better quarterback than those two. Maybe not as charismatic, but he's definitely a better quarterback. So if he goes out there and the Saints start off this season overachieving, I think the vibe will change a little bit. I really do. So we'll see how that all plays out. But it's a fascinating discussion to have as we get into Week 1, because if the Saints are going to be good, I've mentioned many times, the defense needs to set the tone. But the defense can only get you so far in today's NFL. You need good quarterback play. You need a good offense. And that's going to start with Derek Carr and how he handles Clint Kubiak system this year. So I want to get into the schedule for the Saints because it's a little bit tricky. That's how the best way I could put it. It is a little bit tricky for them. You got Panthers week 1, but it gets a little bit more complicated after that. And I'll discuss and kind of elaborate in just a second. Before I do that, just want to remind you guys, if you are watching live, make sure to like the video. It helps out the channel and we greatly appreciate it. And also leave your own comments, whether it's a prediction for the season, a question about week 1, a concern about week 1, anything you want to put out there. We'll put it in the chat and we'll get it up in just a little bit so we can share your thoughts with the audience. So back to the early schedule for Dennis Allen and the Saints. It is going to test them. Yes, you might view the Panthers game as a winnable game. Again, you still got to play it. There's no guarantees in this damn sport. The rest of that 6-game slate, though, for the Saints, oh man, it is tough. And that gets us to something I tweeted earlier this week and our tweet of the week presented by Standard Mortgage, your local lender for life. To get in touch with the home loan expert today, you give them a call at 504-569-3902. I tweeted earlier this week, the first 6 games of the Saints schedule really are tough, but at least we'll get some clarity on this team early. They face the Panthers, Cowboys, Eagles, Falcons, Chiefs, Buccaneers. They go 3-3 or better in those first 6 games. This team could overachieve. Again, we got to see how it all plays out. But I just threw you guys that schedule. And there's one thing that a lot of us, including myself, I'm guilty of this quite often, love to say. Dennis Allen cannot coach this team to wins against quality opponents. Winning record, he doesn't do it. Well, he's going to have to. Because, yeah, week 1, Panthers, maybe you might think that's a layup, and we know it's not because divisional games are never a layup. But let's say the Saints go out and win that. Week 2 against Dallas, a team that won 12 games last year. That's not going to be an easy opponent. Week 3 against Philadelphia, a team that's 2 years removed from a Super Bowl appearance, 1 year removed from an 11-6 season, and we know they still got a lot of talent. They got questions, no doubt about it, but they got talent. Week 4, Falcons, loaded up on talent this year. We know what they bring to the table. That is not going to be an easy game, and that could set the tone for the division moving forward. You got to be able to defend yourself against your division opponents, and obviously for the Saints, we know that for them, Falcons have been a thorn in their side for the last couple of years, even without good quarterback play. Now they add a much better quarterback in Kirk Cousins. How's that going to play out? We're going to find out. But after that Falcons game, you think you want to relax? You want to take it easy? No, it gets more difficult for this team. You got to go to Kansas City. You got to face the 2-time defending champions at Arrowhead on Monday night. Lord knows that is a test. I mean, trying to stop Mahomes in that offense and throw any, packages at him that may confuse him, that's going to be tough, even for a really good defensive coach like Dennis Allen. And after that, you got Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, who the Saints went 1-1 against last year. And I do think that is a more tolerable matchup, one that you can envision the Saints winning more than the others. But that's not an easy game in the slightest, too. I mean, Baker Mayfield had one really, really good game against the Saints last year. So we'll see how this all plays out for the Saints. But we're going to get clarity on 2 things. What is the ceiling of this team? And can Dennis Allen finally coach against winning teams? We're going to get that answer super early. Because right now, the answer is no, he can't coach against winning teams because we've seen them time and time again come up short against winning teams. We saw it last year. Didn't matter if it was the Lions. Didn't matter if it was the Rams. Didn't matter if it was the Texans. Any of those games against quality opponents, the Saints lost. And they were like that in 2022 in DA's first year as their head coach. So can he get better at coaching against winning teams? We're about to find out. What is the ceiling for this Saints team? We're also going to find out. Because, people are going to say, wow, 3-3, what a bar to set. If the Saints go out there and they beat the Panthers, split the Cowboys-Eagles game, split the Bucks-Falcons divisional games, and okay, I'll give them the loss to the Chiefs because it's the Chiefs. The Chiefs should beat down on the Saints. And they go 3-3 through the really, really tough part of their schedule. They could mess around and do enough to get a wild card spot or win what I expect to believe yet another meh year for the NFC South. I think it's possible. But you got to set the tone early. And on the flip side, just like I'm trying to preach about, they can get some optimism. They can feel good about this team. If it unravels early, good luck for DA. Good luck for Derek Carr. Good luck for Clint Kubiak because you're going to feel like the walls are caving in. So there's pros, there's cons, there's good, there's bad. We get that. But I do love, to some degree, that the Saints are going to have to figure it out early. And if there is one advantage, teams are a little rusty out of the gate. You do not want to play the Chiefs when it's November and December and the playoffs are rolling around and they're starting to hit their stride. I could say the same thing about maybe Dallas, although we know in December, that's when the wheels start coming off, not when they start getting hot. Philly, though, rather play him now or play him later. I guess right now is probably a better time for the Saints. So first 6 games are not going to be easy, and I am very interested to see how it all plays out for them. But before we get into the entire 6-game schedule, you got to get through game 1 first. And like I mentioned before, Saints-Panthers is going to be the first game of the year for New Orleans. And there's a lot to dissect with this one. A lot. So let's start with the obvious, guys. How do you defend against Bryce Young? Do you make his life a living hell? I like Bryce Young. I think he's a really good dude. Loved watching him play at Alabama. He did not look good against the Saints last year, in my opinion. He did not. You go through his first game, had 153 yards and a touchdown, got sacked 4 times. That was one of his better games last year. Didn't have any turnovers, but didn't do anything explosive. And then the second time around, you thought, all right, another look at DA's defense. How does he respond? Sacked 4 times again, only 137 yards, no touchdowns. So Bryce Young against the Saints last year didn't do an awful lot. Didn't do a lot to impress, which is good for us Saints fans. Now, new system this year, better weapons perhaps, adding Deontay Johnson. But still, there are questions surrounding this young quarterback, whether or not he could be the franchise guy for them. So for the Saints, there is no more, a no-brainer key for this than putting pressure on Bryce Young, kind of making him feel like he's in a chokehold and just really suffocating around him, because I think this Saints defensive line has the capability of doing that when they're at full strength. And the one good thing about week 1 for this Saints team is they're going to be at full strength. I can't promise it for the rest of the season because I know how the football gods work. I know how the injury bug works with this team. They get the worst injuries at the worst time. We're all used to that as Saints fans. But right now, today, the Saints are healthy. And there's no reason why Chase Young, Brian Brzee, Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson, all those guys go out there and light it up against the Panthers. And I know the Panthers put investments in the offensive line, and that was a major key for them because you need to make sure your young quarterback's protected so he could have confidence, time to throw, and then you could get a better evaluation about whether or not he's even good. So I know the Panthers have new resources there, but they're still gelling. They're still trying to figure out kind of the rhythm of being that new look offensive line. Saints, on the other hand, good camaraderie on the defensive line, except you added Chase Young, who has had time to work his way in. I thought Chase Young might have needed more time to get back from that neck injury. He bounced back really well, and he's looked great in training camp. He's looked great in the preseason. Now's the time for him to go out there and just ball out week 1 against the Panthers. And I think he can absolutely do that. So how do you defend against Bryce Young? Do you make his life a living hell? Do you get pressure on the young quarterback? I mean, that is absolutely by far and away the easiest key to give for the Saints. If they can do that, they're going to win this game. The Saints defense is not going to be able to win the Saints every game this year. I know they'd love for that to be the case. They have the talent to win them some games this year. This is one, though, that they could, because you're going up against a second-year guy who is still kind of de facto rookie when you talk about the total amount of starts he's got in his career. Doesn't even have 17 starts yet in his career. You got to go out there and impose your will. And I think the Saints can. And honestly, if they don't, I'd be pretty disappointed. And now I mentioned the new system. So I can't just act like this is a whole new Panthers team. The same Panthers team, excuse me. They got out there, got a new coach, got Dave Canales, who's with the Bucs. But Dave Canales and DA know each other. Last year, first game, edge Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield had over 300 yards. He looked great in the dome. I got to give the Bucs their credit on that one. They went out there. They beat the Saints thoroughly in week 4. How did DA respond to a second look at Dave Canales and his offensive system? Man, they bottled up the Buccaneers, winning that game 23-13 on the road. Baker had 2 picks. Rachaad White had only 42 rushing yards. Saints went out there, and they looked ridiculously prepared against that Buccaneers offense after getting a second look. So, yes, Bryce Young has a new system, but it's not new for Dennis Allen. And again, Dennis Allen has concerns. I am the first one to say it. But the man knows how to coach defense, and I expect him to have a plan against this Dave Canales offense, which is technically having a downgrade at quarterback right now. Bryce Young could eventually be better than Baker Mayfield, but Baker Mayfield right now is a better quarterback than Bryce Young, so I'm very interested to see how that all plays out. Obviously, that's not the only matchup. It doesn't just come down to Bryce Young and imposing your will. On the flip side for the Saints, they got to protect Derek Carr. Got to protect him from Derek Brown. Got to protect him from Jadeveon Clowney. Easier said than done, of course. But how you do that is by imposing the run game early and often for the Saints. I think that we saw in the preseason, whether it was Jordan Mims, James Robinson, Cabote, you saw the Saints have a clear and dangerous run attack. Way better than anything we saw with Pete Carmichael's offense. So, if you're New Orleans, now you got Alvin back. Jamal looked decent in the preseason. This is coming from someone who criticizes him. There's no reason the Saints can't go out there early and establish the run with that ground scheme, opening up some running lanes and setting the tone there in terms of their identity. And everything can trickle off that. If you're able to go out there and really establish the run with AK, and I feel like the Saints are going to be able to at certain points in this season, and this is a good test for them to do so against Carolina, things get easier for Derek Carr. The box might be stacked. Maybe he can take advantage on a play action pass. Maybe there's motion that you can sit out there, kind of throw the defense off. You got to worry about AK. You got to worry about Shaheen moving from left to right. How are you going to adjust to that if you're Carolina's defense, which I still think needs to add more pieces? They got some pieces, but they need to add more. That to me is interesting. Establishing the run is so paramount for this team because it has a dual purpose. You're not just establishing the run to get AK going, to really get the chains moving. You're also taking some pressure off Derek Carr, and some pressure has to be taken off Derek Carr because he's playing playing behind an offensive line that we as Saints fans cannot trust. We can trust Eric McCoy. We can have high hopes for Fuaga, but he's just a rookie. Left guard, let's be honest, guys. Let's be really, really honest with each other. That is not a position that you're confident in right now. I'm sorry. If you're going out there and you feel like Lucas Patrick's going to get the job done, okay. All power to you. Right tackle, we'll see what they do with Trevor Penning if they choose to start him. I mean, does anyone trust Trevor Penning in a regular season game? I think the answer is probably no. Cesar Ruiz, he's had good games. He's also had a lot of bad games. So the offensive line isn't great. Got to run the football, take some pressure off Derek Carr. But if you're going to throw the football, how does Chris Olave do against J.C. Horn? J.C. Horn's a really talented corner. No one's going to deny that. He's also been really hurt since he's come into the league. That's something that we also can't deny. What I will say about Chris Olave, and I think it's so interesting for him this season, I am not one of those people that is ready to crown Chris Olave as an elite wide receiver. I think there's no doubt he can become an elite wide receiver. I do not think right now, as things currently stand, he is an elite wide receiver yet. He's got to take that next step. But the year to take that next step is now. Year 3 really is that time where a lot of guys just blossom into that star. And I think Chris Olave has proven he's a really good player. Can he be a great player? I think he can. You go out there, win your week 1 matchup against J.C. Horn. I think that sets the tone for the rest of the season. And again, there's a lot of pressure on him because the Saints aren't exactly loaded with skill players, particularly at the wide receiver position. It's really him, Shaheen, and then hoping someone steps up. But Olave versus Horn, that's definitely a matchup that us Saints fans have to keep an eye on. On the flip side, Marshawn Lattimore, I am curious to see who he's matched up against. Just from being traumatized in the past, I hope it's not Adam Thielen. And to this day, it is crazy that we've seen Lattimore lock up Mike Evans, Amari Cooper. I've seen him have success against Devontae Adams. But I've seen him struggle against Adam Thielen time and time again, and it just still blows my mind that that's a thing. But maybe we have that matchup again. So we'll see how that all plays out. But overall, Saints-Panthers, week 1. Panthers have a new coaching staff in town that's going to take some time to adjust. The Saints, I don't believe it's a will win this game, have to win this game. You have to go out there, beat Carolina, get to 1-0, get some confidence going into that week 2 game against Dallas, and figure it all out from there. And I think in a league where teams are rusty out of the gates, you got to lean on defense. And the Saints, for the most part, have a lot of returning players back on defense, which is good for them because it is a talented unit. There's no reason they can't win this game. Even if it's an ugly 17-14, there's no reason why they can't go out and do that. 2017, 17-14, whatever it might be, they have to go out there and they got to win this game. And frankly, I don't care how much it's by. Would I love for them to cover the spread? Sure. But for me, a win's a win, and I think the Saints got to go out there and get it done. And I actually do believe they will go out there and get it done for week 1 because I think for the Panthers, the record isn't going to matter this much this year as much as does Bryce Young look good. But week 1, new system, Saints defense, they got to take advantage of that matchup. And if they don't, us Saints fans are going to have problems. Trust me, we are going to have problems if that's the case. So Saints over the Panthers, in my opinion. That's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to say, I mentioned it before. So I'll go 20-17. I hope it's better than that for the Saints, but I'll go 20-17, and hopefully it's not as nerve-wracking as that prediction may seem. So I mentioned before, guys, if you have any comments, any predictions, concerns, statements, anything you want to throw out there, you put it in the chat and we'll bring it up. And we're going to get that started now with our Q&A presented by Sunshine, your hometown John Deere dealer. We're going to get into all the comments that you guys have here, and we're going to start with Rachel saying, oh my God, we are so back. If they lose week 1, we riot. Yeah, I think that will be the consensus feeling in New Orleans. If they lose week 1 against Carolina, confidence-wise, it's like, where the hell do you turn from, right? You lose week 1, then all of a sudden you got Dallas, Philly, Atlanta, Kansas City, Tampa. If you can't beat Carolina, where are the wins coming from? That is the question. And that's why I think week 1's always vital, just to get the vibes up, especially for a team like the Saints. But to know that they could still beat the bottom dwellers, that to me is very important. And if they can't go out there and do that, guys, we're going to have a tough year. And I don't want to be miserable this year. I want to be kind of, happy for the most part watching this team. So go out there and beat Carolina. And like I said, if they don't, we are going to have problems. Jack says maybe an exaggeration, but considering how bad the Panthers were a year ago, losing them week 1 basically ends the season for me. I wouldn't say it's an exaggeration to some degree, because I do feel like if the Saints go out there and they lose week 1 against the Panthers, Saints fans, I don't want to say they're going to check out immediately, but how do you convince the fan base, which has already got one foot out the door at the moment when it comes to this regime, how do you convince them to stick around if they can't beat a Carolina team that won 2 games last year? And neither one of those 2 games were against the Saints. So if they couldn't beat the Saints last year, there's no reason why they should be able to beat them this year. Because again, I know they made improvements to the O-line on paper. I know they brought in a new coach, but they're still learning. They're still young. The Saints, granted, are trying to kind of do this like soft rebuild on the fly. The Saints still have winning caliber players on the roster. So to be honest, Jack, I really don't even think it's an exaggeration. I think you got to go out there and win week 1. And if not, I think a lot of people are going to be out on this team, which is unfortunate, but I think it's a legitimate possibility. Jack says, who's your prediction to win the NFC South? All right. So right now, if I had to guess, I think that I would probably go Atlanta, but I would not go Atlanta in the landslide that people are saying. Like, I think there's a lot of people. And I'll say, I'll name drop today. I spoke to Mike Greenberg from ESPN for about 15 minutes today. And I asked him, what would be your surprise team this year? Like, who's the team that you think is going to shock people? And he said, I think the Falcons are going to make a deep playoff run. Now, do I blame him for thinking that? No, on paper, Atlanta's got players. And my biggest concern for Atlanta was defense. I didn't think they had the guys. And you go out there and you add Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons, you definitely get better in that department. But I don't expect Atlanta to be that team. Maybe I'll be wrong, and the Mike Greenbergs of the world will be right, and that team will surprise people and make a run in the playoffs. I do think Atlanta will win the division, though. I expect Tampa to take a step back. I expect the Saints to take a step back, I guess, in record, but I don't think the Saints are going to be this 5-win team that people are predicting. I think the Saints will probably be in the hunt for the division, and it's going to come down to games like Carolina, games like Tampa. Winning your division battle. If the Saints can go 4-2 in the division, they'll be in great shape. So I think the Falcons, I say, would win the division right now, but I think it's such a close margin. And honestly, guys, I think as out as we are on when it comes to DA and the future of this franchise with certain things, they still technically should be contending for this division, because it's not good enough yet, this division, in my opinion. Rachel says 5-2 is possible. 5-1, you said. Yeah, look, if they go 5-1, this team will be making the playoffs. That to me is a certainty. If they go 5-1, they would be making the playoffs. I don't expect them to go 5-1, though. Expect at least a loss to the Chiefs. Expect them to, at the minimum, split the Eagles-Cowboys games, although I'll throw it out there from now. I think the Saints can beat Dallas in Dallas. I really do. And I'll explain next week why I feel pretty confident about that. And maybe I'll look like a stupid idiot when we go back and look at this in a week from now. But I actually think that they can go out there and they can go beat the Cowboys in Dallas. I just have that feeling that they can do it. So we'll see about that. Lala says, I'm not scared. I'm not putting them on my DraftKings parlay. I'm scared. Yeah, week 1 parlays are pretty tough. And we'll talk about DraftKings in just a little bit for sure. I'm going to probably stick to player props if I'm being quite honest, whether it's Alvin's rushing yards, whether it's Olave's receiving yards, maybe anytime touchdown Taysom Hill if I'm feeling good, but I might stay away from spreads and money lines before the game. Live though, maybe I'll take my chance. Jerry G says, hey Chris, Who Dat Nation, football is back. It most definitely is. K-Man says, I'm interested to see what the D-line rotation looks like. Is Chase Young a 3-down player for us or a 3rd-down pass rush specialist with Cam sliding inside in passing situations? It depends what Chase Young shows up. Chase Young in the preseason looked like a 3-down player to me. Blowing up the run, setting the edge properly. I think those are things for the Saints that they want to see. He looks highly motivated. And I think it's a win-win for both these teams, for both these sides, right now, because the Saints need a pass rusher to step up after whiffing on Peyton Turner, whiffing on Isaiah Foskey, Marcus Davenport never working out, losing Trey Hendrickson in free agency. All those things kind of factor into their defensive end problem. But here you go. You got Chase Young, who's still in his mid-20s, still has his best football ahead of him if he could just stay healthy and focused. But I think the focus thing, there's millions of reasons why for him to be focused, because there is a fat contract up for grabs if this guy goes out there and does what he can do every Sunday. And I think that is terrorize opposing quarterbacks. I think he's more than capable of doing it. Now he's got to go out there and do it. But I think for Saints, though, you mentioned passing downs. I would not be surprised if we see them kind of go with their NASCAR package of Chase Young and Carl Granderson on the edge, Brian Brzee, Cam Jordan on the inside. And man, from just a straight rushing the passer standpoint, does it get better than that for New Orleans? Does it? I mean, those are 4 guys that know how to get after the quarterback. So we shall see. But I think that's what you're probably looking at. Jerry with a really nice prediction here, 28-14 Saints. I would love to see that happen. I hope it happens. I think it'll be close just because week 1, division game, those games tend to be closer than usual. But man, if you end up being right on this, Jerry, I would love nothing more than that. Give me 28-14 Saints, and I would take it. K-Man says 24-10 Saints. Would also take that. I mean, that anything above 2 scores or around 2 scores, sign me up for. One Smoke says Carr's not winning this fan base over. I don't expect him to. But as I mentioned at the top, and if anyone missed it when we were going through our rundown, for me, and I can only speak for myself, guys, of course, but all I care about for Derek Carr, production, accountability, wins and losses. That's what I care about. Accountability, you can't be throwing Olave under the bus. You can't be throwing certain people under the bus. You got to be better than that. Quarterbacks take all the blame when they lose. They don't take any of the credit when they win. And us Saints fans should know that better than anyone else because we've seen Drew Brees do it his entire career. Production-wise, I give Derek Carr his credit for the way he finished last season. I thought he finished last season on a high note, had some really nice games in there. Granted, against some mediocre opponents, but played well against the Falcons, well against the Bucs, well against the Giants. He looked like a good quarterback. Can he build off that? And can he do it when the games still matter? And the games certainly matter in the beginning of the season when everyone is in playoff contention, mathematically speaking. And they don't matter as much when you're not in playoff contention anymore and you need 15 things to go your way to clinch a playoff berth. It doesn't feel the same. So production-wise, he had 25 touchdowns and 8 picks last year. Can he do that on a consistent level? If he does that, he's got my vote of approval. Can he be accountable? If he does that, good. I'll be on board with it. And if the Saints are winning games, then great. Because look, I don't think Derek Carr's contract's egregious in this climate of quarterback contracts. I mean, there are guys out there getting paid a lot of money who haven't won anything. Just to name a few, Tua gets paid a lot of money to not win anything. I am just as big of a Jordan Love fan as anyone else, and I think that kid is going to be a superstar for a while. He's the highest paid quarterback right now. He hasn't won anything. You will get paid a lot in this league. So Carr at $40 million, not to comparing him to those 2 quarterbacks that I mentioned, but technically in the salary scheme of everything, it's not bad. But you don't pay $40 million to just be an average team. You want to win games. So hopefully he can do that. But I think week 1, let's enter with a clean slate and see how it goes. And if we get the same results from Carr, inconsistencies, not always accountable, then you guys do whatever you want. You guys go bash him. For all I care, tweet up a storm. It doesn't matter. But for me, week 1, we're entering a new chapter. Let's see. Fresh page. Let's see what he does with it. I'm excited to see how the Saints offense looks. It might not work. It might work well, and Clint Kubiak will look like a genius and get a head coaching job somewhere else. So we'll see. Jerry G says Falcons not making it. Yeah, look, I think the Falcons can win the NFC South. And as I said before, if I had to put money on it, and I don't feel great about it, I would probably take the Falcons. But I don't feel confident about it at all. And I definitely don't feel confident about them making a run in the playoffs because I wouldn't take them over the 49ers. I wouldn't take them over the Eagles. I wouldn't take them over the Lions. Wouldn't take them over the Packers. So wouldn't take them over the Rams either, for that matter. So I don't love the idea of the Falcons being this dark horse contender. But to win the South, sure. I mean, look, Tampa won the division last year, right? And not once in my mind did I think Tampa can go make some noise. Not once in my mind. And, that's why I'm just not I'm not really budging there. Now, I'm going to bring up this comment because I think it is a great point. And that's why when I mentioned the NFC South, Saints, Bucks, Falcons, those are the teams that you probably expect to contend. Is DA a good head coach? No. But he's a top 5 defensive play caller. Raheem Morris and Todd Bowles both have losing records, but nobody says anything about them holding those teams back. That is why when I mentioned the Falcons, I mentioned the Bucks, and I mentioned the Saints, I lumped them all into the same category. They got quarterbacks that can be good at times, but they're never great. And they got coaches who we know are good defensive play callers, but also have failed as head coaches. And I said that even though Todd Bowles made the playoffs last year, when Raheem Morris got hired, I said it seems like this is a DA situation all over again, but you're hoping that he could turn it around with a better roster, with Kirk Cousins. Obviously got playmakers like Bijan and Drake London. You're hoping that works out. But these teams are all very similar. They're all very similar. The only difference I would say right now is that the Saints are kind of pulling back on the money department. The Falcons are going all in. So we'll see if it works out for them. Didn't work out for the Saints. We'll see what happens with them. Justin to Get Me Cash says, how many reception yards will Olave have in game 1? Also said, what will Olave's stat line look like week 1 in your opinion? I mean, I'll just go off what Olave usually does in these situations. Give me like 4 catches or 5 catches, anywhere from 60 to 70 yards. That's probably what I would expect from Olave. I would love to see more, but I feel like that's the safe benchmark right now. For game 1, J.C. Horn's a respectable corner. That's kind of where I'm at. That's where I'm at with Chris Olave, but we'll see. Maybe he does even better. If you guys have any more comments, you guys can get them in the chat, and I'll pull them up before we wrap up this show. But before I do that, just want to get a quick word from one of our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook.
NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, and an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BOOT. That's code BOOT, B-O-O-T, for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/FT Ball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. Let's get into some more comments before we wrap up this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. Justin to Get Me Cash says, who gets the first sack for the Saints? Let's go with a guy that has such a high motor, Carl Granderson. Doesn't mean he's going to have the most sacks for the Saints this year. Could be, he's going to be one of the heavy contenders, but it could be Chase Young as well. But I'll go Carl Granderson for the first sack. I think he just has that kind of relentless motor to him that I love. Never quits on a play. Bryce Young might try to extend some plays, especially with his legs against his Saints defensive line. Let's go Carl Granderson getting the first sack. Boston Ballfont says, if we go 2-3 after the first 5 weeks with wins against Carolina and Atlanta, we will be in a good position. Yeah, it's possible. Look, that's why for me, in those first 6 games, if you get to 3-3, I'm in. I mean, I'm in for the season anyway, guys. I got a show to do, halftime shows to do. We got a lot to do here for Boo Crew Media. So I'm going to be in regardless. They could lose all 17 games, and my stupid face right here will be on YouTube for your viewing pleasure, and we're going to talk Saints football regardless if they lose every single game. But if they get to 3-3, I do believe that is a great spot for them to be in, because the Saints under DA have played their best football in November, December, when the defense starts clicking, offenses start slowing down, and they get a little bit of rhythm on their offensive side of the football. So can you get through the first 6 games at 3-3, get a Panthers win, split the Falcons-Bucks games, and split the Eagles-Cowboys game and take the L against the Chiefs? That's fine with me. Monday night, you expect it on that type of, I guess, schedule to go to the defending champs home. 3-3, I think they're in a great shape. I really do. So we'll see. But that's what, for me, people might say, you're really setting the bar so high sarcastically. I don't care. Trust me, guys, if they get to that number, they'll be in good shape. Because when you get to the middle of your schedule and you play, Falcons at home, and you play a Browns team that that's going to be defensive slugfest, a Giants team, that might be a defensive slugfest, you can win those games. You can. So we'll see how they do. Jack says, thoughts on the impact of Kool-Aid in secondary? I don't expect a big impact early. Someone have to go down. I hope that's not the case. But we'll see. Yeah, at some point, he's going to get an opportunity. Whether it's injury or someone not stepping up, opportunity will knock on his doorstep, and he's got to make sure he takes advantage. K-Man says, over-under Shaheen 3 touchdowns this season. I will go under on return touchdowns. Over on total touchdowns for Shaheen, if that's what the number would be, which I don't expect. But I'll go under on 3 return touchdowns. That's pretty tough, man. But if he goes over on that number, Saints will be in great shape. What game outside of the Saints are you most looking forward to watching? If we're talking about this week, and I imagine that's the case, 2, I really am fascinated to watch the Rams-Lions game. How do the Rams look? How do the Lions look? I mean, because those could be 2 NFC contenders right there. And then, I'm going to be honest, this might not be the game that is going to be on everyone's mind. I am actually very curious to see how that Cardinals-Bills game plays out. I think that everyone's kind of out on the Bills this year, and I don't see it that way. I think Josh Allen's going to play well. I think that run game is going to be good for them. So I'm excited to see that. And on the flip side, I think Arizona could be a frisky team this year. Maybe not great in the win-loss column, but can they be like a 7-10 competitive football team? I think they can. But so many good games on the schedules, guys. I think Texans-Colts can be fascinating. Monday night, Jets-Niners will be great, of course. Tomorrow's game, Chiefs-Ravens, is going to be good. So the schedule's great. But if I had to pick some, I think Lions-Rams is a game I can't wait to watch. And I'm also excited to see Bills-Cardinals in that 1 p.m. window, which is tough because it's going to interfere with the Saints, obviously, at noon Central. But, I'll have Red Zone on one of the screens at some point. Jack says, Eagles, Packers, who you going with? Friday night in Brazil. I think, man, first off, great matchup. Excellent matchup. I'm going to go the Packers. I think that the Eagles, and I could be way wrong on this, guys, and thankfully I don't cover the Eagles. So if I'm wrong on this, no one will probably care. I think the Eagles are going to be an underachieving team this year. I think there's a lot of hype surrounding this team, but we don't talk about how you lose a leader in Jason Kelce. You lose Hassan Reddick. And yeah, you brought in Huff. I know he's a good pass rusher, but Reddick, you lose him. That's going to be tough. The secondary is old and not that explosive. So yeah, you went out there. You added some young assets. I get that. But are they going to step up? Are you really going to have a rookie secondary rise to the occasion? That's a lot to ask for in today's NFL. It is so hard to ask for. Changes on the coaching staff, new play caller on offense, new play caller on defense, bringing in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. And then Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, so I'm not here to be a hot take artist. But if we look at Jalen Hurts' career right now, he's got some decent football, won an MVP caliber season, and that's kind of how it looks. So is the MVP caliber season an outlier? Or did he just have a rough year last season and he'll bounce back? So I'm fascinated to see how that plays out. Justin to Get Me Cash says, I think Texans versus Colts will be a shootout. I think it could be, especially if Anthony Richardson gets it going. Obviously, CJ Stroud and Texans are going to have a lot of hype. That's going to be a really good week 1 game because the Colts are not getting a lot of talk. But if Anthony Richardson ends up being good, they can be a frisky team this year because we saw last year they were vying for a playoff spot with Gardner Minshew as their quarterback. If Richardson can give them some juice, they'll be in good shape. Do you think Jamar Chase plays Sunday? I do believe he plays Sunday. I do believe he plays. I just think, look, these guys know that they have leverage because wide receivers are getting paid and they're so vital, whether it's CeeDee Lamb, whether it's Brandon Ayuk, whether it's Jamar Chase. So you play the kind of negotiation game, and sometimes it gets frustrating, but I do think Jamar will play. Again, that Bengals, Patriots, even if he doesn't play, they got to go out there and they got to win that game. But speaking of winning that game and having to go out there and get it done, obviously Saints-Panthers, like I mentioned, in week 1, there's no excuse. Saints have to go out there. They got to establish the tone on defense, make life a living hell for Bryce Young, and then on offense, establish the run, make life easier for Derek Carr, build everything off that, and then you can take your shot plays, whether it's to Olave, to Shaheen, sprinkle in a little bit of Taysom Hill, and get this W. So we'll see if the Saints can do it. I believe they will beat the Panthers in week 1, Sunday afternoon. Now they got to go out there and do their damn job. We'll be back later this weekend to have our halftime show of Saints-Panthers and, of course, our Saints-Panthers postgame. Hopefully, it's a victory postgame for us here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.